what has Nigel Farage and Zia Yusuf said about mass deportations in the past? Let's go through a series of clips and contrast them with what Rupert Lowe and Restore Britain have said. First up, Nigel Farage's infamous interview in 2024 with Stephen Edgington on GB News.
It's a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. We simply can't do it. At the moment, it's a political impossibility.
But is it your ambition?
No. Yeah, I'm not going to get dragged down the route of mass deportations or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, people are always going to come and go, and we are a country that's engaged in international trade, and we have relationships around the world through the Commonwealth, etc. But yeah, we have to aim at a balanced migration policy.
But net zero still means hundreds of thousands of people coming into Britain, immigrants coming into Britain. Isn't that too many?
It may well be, but we have to start somewhere.
Trump says in America that he wants mass deportations. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants are in Britain at the moment. Some estimates say the number could even be in, 1 million plus. So do you support deporting all of those people?
It's impossible to do. Literally impossible to do.
In terms of the atmosphere in Britain, are you concerned that there is a rising level of anti-white hatred?
I'm just concerned about a deeply divided society.
Farage has been inconsistent on mass deportations, voicing his support for them on July 4th, 2024, on Election Day, promising Reform UK voters that Reform UK will deport every single illegal immigrant, and then going on to give that interview to Stephen Edgington. And then, after Rupert Lowe, when he was a Reform MP, called for mass deportations, and Nigel Farage, Zia Yusuf, and Lee Anderson expelled Rupert Lowe from the party, alleging he was bullying his staff, that his team was engaging in misconduct, that he had threatened to kill Zia Yusuf, and spreading the malicious lie that he had early onset dementia. Nigel Farage commented on Rupert Lowe's allegations that Nigel had tried to censor Rupert's speech in northwest Essex and remove any mention of mass deportations. Farage said to The Telegraph, "I've campaigned strongly on this, immigration, for years, and it's a completely false assertion. The idea you can deport whole communities who have British passports is just not possible under British law, and never was. We'll discuss whether or not that's the case later, but that's not the claim that Rupert Lowe made." Continuing, Farage said, "Furthermore, his speech in Essex that he talks about, what I stopped him from using was the word repatriation. I told him not to use the word repatriation, as well as mass deportations, because I thought it was a very grave, dark and dangerous use of language." Nigel Farage thinks the phrase mass deportations is a very grave, dark and dangerous use of language. I know for a fact this annoyed the Trump administration, and that this was made clear to Nigel Farage, that the Trump administration will not be supporting Nigel Farage if he continues to condemn the language that Donald Trump used in his 2024 election campaign, explicitly promising mass deportations. Farage said, "This is all an attempt not just to damage reform, but to get Elon Musk thinking that he, Rupert, is the good guy. And given Elon Musk is persuaded by Rupert Lowe's launch of Restore Britain, I think that has succeeded." It's not just mass deportations that Nigel Farage has been inconsistent on, it's the very reason that Rupert Lowe was expelled from the party. In this Telegraph interview, he said, basically, what is happening here is Rupert Lowe knows there's no way back, and he said to Lee Anderson, "I'll whip an MP, I will slit the throat of the Reform Party, he's out to cause maximum destruction and damage." The party also reported Mr. Lowe to the police over repeated threats he is alleged to have made against Zia Yusuf, the Reform chairman. Apparently, Reform was saying that Rupert Lowe was going around Parliament saying he was going to shoot Zia Yusuf, which is why he had his shotguns taken from his house when the police raided his farm. But last week, at his shadow cabinet announcement, Nigel Farage told members of the press that Rupert Lowe had been expelled from the party in a brutal but necessary fashion, justifying calling the police on a sitting MP under false pretenses, because he had called for mass deportations of what Nigel Farage mischaracterises as whole communities. Meaning, Farage justified Zia Yusuf calling the police on Rupert Lowe to get rid of him from the party because Rupert Lowe was calling for mass deportations, and Nigel Farage disagreed with that.
When he stood up and said that we've got to consider the mass deportation of entire communities, including those born in the United Kingdom, that just moves way beyond a point of reasonableness, of decency, of morality. And that was the moment at which, I realised we just had to get rid of him, and get rid of him as quickly as we could. And I think in terms of the way we dealt with that, we were probably more brutal than the other parties. But you know what? That's the way it's going to be.
If Nigel Farage is prepared to justify Zia Yusuf, remember, the man who is now Reform's Shadow Home Secretary, who, if Reform were elected to government, would be in charge of both the police and immigration policy, as well as conducting mass deportations. If he is prepared to justify Zia Yusuf calling the police on Rupert Lowe because Rupert Lowe said he wanted mass deportations, then can Nigel Farage, Zia Yusuf and Reform be trusted to carry out mass deportations? It's all well and good making the promise, but if you have continually tried to prevent the promise from being made, then how can we trust you when you make the promise? Back when Rupert Lowe was kicked out of the party in March 2025, Nigel Farage was saying that mass deportations were the insidious preoccupation of the online radical right and that Rupert Lowe had been captured by them. Rupert, to his credit, responded with saying, "Yes, I want to deport huge numbers of illegal migrants. I make no apologies for that." And even after the launch of Operation Restoring Justice, Nigel Farage was still saying that it is a political impossibility to conduct mass deportations of millions of illegal migrants, which is now something that Zia Yusuf is promising to do, and instead just said, well, it's possible to deport hundreds of thousands, even though he explicitly told Stephen Edgington in the clip I played earlier that it is a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. So he keeps changing his mind and moving the goalposts and not admitting that he previously said it was not his ambition to do mass deportations.
Nigel Farage, last September you told GB News that it was a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. Nigel Farage, last September you told GB News that it was a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people and that you simply couldn't do it. What has changed your mind that you now believe that you can?
The political impossibility was deporting millions and millions of people, and that's where the argument had gone. We had a situation, a political difficulty within Reform UK. This does happen to parties. They do have difficulties and problems. We had a problem that one of our MPs, who's no longer an MP, was talking about deporting entire communities, including people who've been born here. And frankly, we found that unacceptable. And so I just did not want, I think you can quote me for another interview, to get dragged down the route of mass deportations at that stage. We have sorted out that political internal difficulty that we had, and since that time, the work has been done on a credible plan so that we can deport hundreds of thousands of people over the 5 years of a Reform government.
We'll go through the credibility of Reform's written plan in a moment, but are the party themselves credible to deliver that plan, if the plan is credible, if they keep changing their mind on the issue and being dishonest about what their leader has previously said? And Farage's excuses for his inconsistency on the issue of mass deportations reached a level of absurdity just weeks after he expelled Rupert Lowe from the party. Because despite him saying to Stephen Edgington that he doesn't want to do mass deportations, they're a political impossibility and they aren't his ambition, and that he is unbothered by demographic change, he then went and told a rally ahead of the local elections in 2025 that anyone saying he has never committed to mass deportations is spreading misinformation sponsored by Indian bots.
We will, to be clear, and by the way, if you read different on X over the last few weeks, sponsored by Indian bots, I suggest you ignore it. I will reiterate, nobody that comes into our country on the back of a lorry or via a boat will ever be given refugee status, will ever be given leave to remain. And let me tell you, everyone that comes illegally will be deported, full stop, end of story.
Well, unfortunately, Nigel, you weren't speaking Hindi or Punjabi or Urdu in your interview with Stephen Edgington, and so I heard you in English say that you didn't want to conduct mass deportations because it was a political impossibility. So, look, I'm happy that Reform, presuming they become the next party of government, have now adopted this policy. Reminder, I was the guy at Reform Conference alongside my friend Charlie Downs, who was on stage at a Fringe event and said the one policy Reform needs to adopt before the next election in order to win the election is mass deportations. So I'm happy that they've done it. but just don't be dishonest with your base and with the general public by telling them that you've always stood for a policy that you are on camera saying you are not supporting. Farage is fond of the Indian bots excuse. I mean, it was already used by his surrogates in the media, Alex Phillips and Lois Perry, to excuse away the popularity of Rupert Lowe and Restore Britain. They're blaming Indian bots for Rupert Lowe's performance on social media. But Nigel Farage also said that his own base actually loves Zia Yusuf, and anyone saying otherwise after Zia Yusuf quit as party chairman because Sarah Poitrin proposed she would ban the burqa and came back a couple of days later, anyone saying that they're a Reform voter who didn't like Zia Yusuf for his treatment of Rupert Lowe or his behaviour towards Poitrin is just an Indian bot.
That the persistent campaign against him on X, and much of it coming from Indian bots,
right,
has perhaps, made some Reform members question him, question his motives. All of that's completely unfair.
I don't think it's unfair to question either Zia Yusuf's motives or Nigel Farage's motives when they've been inconsistent on the one issue that their base cares most about. And as Rupert Lowe mocks in his caption here, the online right is actually a Mumbai call centre stuffed full of Indians with very strong views on mass deportations. Because I'm sure that Indians want other Indians deported from the country. As Rupert joked, a Bangalore supercomputer is pushing mass deportations, low corporation tax, and a picture of Pi, my dog. Maybe I'm secretly a lizard, too. As I pointed out, there was a period of time where Indians overtook Albanians to become the second largest group of channel migrants. And Rupert did say, well, it's a bold tactics to push tweets out there that would get these same people deported, isn't it? So if Farage was dishonest about what he and Zia Yusuf were saying, how can we trust that he was honest about what Rupert Lowe was saying in that Northwest Essex speech in 2025? Well, I'll just play the clip for you and you can see if you disagree with Rupert's consistent stance on mass deportations.
I don't want thoughts and prayers from government. I want action. Deportations of foreign nationals who have come to our country and committed serious crimes against the British people. Deportations of those arriving in our country illegally. Send a message: if you come here without permission, you will not stay under any circumstance. Two words: detain, deport. Deportations of those living in our country illegally. Recent estimates stated that up to 1 in 12 individuals living in our capital city are illegal migrants. I pushed the Home Office for a full review into the impact of illegal migrant crime on British women and girls. They refused. I ask, as I often do, who is this Home Office supposed to be serving? Between the 5th of July last year to the 4th of January this year, there were just 4,390 enforced returns of people with no legal right to remain. It's pathetic. In a recent debate with an immigration lawyer, another profession pork-barreling a living, I was told that a deportation scheme on the scale required would be impossible, as it would take a flight leaving every hour. That sounds like a very good starting point to me. The message has to be clear. If you're in our country illegally, expect deportation. Implement that on the scale required, and the boats will stop overnight. I can promise you that. And finally, on immigration, I prefer to keep it simple, with the 2 Ds: detain, deport. This is how to properly govern. Watching Trump and the Americans, it has made me even more determined than ever to restore our unique country through a great repeal act when Labour falls at the next election, as surely it will. I don't particularly care if we're liked by the rest of the world. I care if we're respected, because right now, Britain is a joke, and it has been for some time. Take this, for example. £10 million was set aside for local inquiries into the rape gangs by the Labour government, just £10 million. This year alone, we sent £133 million to Pakistan in foreign aid. My view, scrap every single penny. Or at the very least, use it as a weapon to force the Pakistani government to accept their deported rapists and criminals. I want the British government to put the British people at the top of the agenda. We should make no apologies for that.
Rupert doesn't care about being liked. He doesn't care about the international obligations or relationship with the Commonwealth that might get in the way of mass deportations for Nigel Farage. And he also doesn't care about blanket legal immigration bans either. He would rather apply those and then weaponize the lucrative foreign aid we give unilaterally to these countries to ensure they take back their predators and visa overstayers instead. And in case there was any ambiguity about Restore Britain's position on deporting whole communities, as Farage alleged, Rupert Lowe made Restore Britain's immigration policy very clear in his latest interview with David Starkey.
First of all, I have said those people who arrive here legally, if the ECHR doesn't allow us to detain and deport them, I would send them to a Scottish island, give them a bowl of porridge and put them in a tent till they decided to go home and let the midges do the rest. I did say that, and I mean it. However, I would detain and I would deport. Anyone arriving illegally, detain and deport. Anyone living here illegally, detain and deport. Anyone in our any criminals in our prisons who are foreign nationals, deport. And I said, and this was the issue between us, he tried to edit my speech in Northwest Essex, in Kemmy's constituency, it would have been end of January 25. People can watch it. I got a standing ovation at the end of it. And he got a little 24-year-old to tell me he didn't want me to use the expression mass when I was talking about deportation. He tried to take that word out, which I did agree to do, although I now hear Zia Yusuf talking about mass deportations. And then the second thing he asked me to do was to take out the clause where I said families of those people where a rapist is raping white underage English working class girls who've been groomed, if that family knew that that person was perpetrating that evil on those vulnerable young girls, if they were foreign nationals or dual nationals, I would deport them. I have never said whole communities of British passport holders should be deported. What I have said is once we've done those things I've just outlined, we do need to start looking at those people who are on welfare, who've come here, who aren't contributing to our society, who don't speak English, and who effectively are going to be a burden to the taxpayer for the foreseeable future. And we should encourage them to leave. And that is what is happening at the moment in Sweden, David.
Indeed in Denmark.
In Denmark, in Sweden, in any country with a modicum of common sense or a modicum of interest in looking after the honest, decent, tax-paying citizens of those countries who are law-abiding and who care about their country. So let me be abundantly clear. You know me, I am not somebody who makes rash comments. And Nigel took not only my career out of context, he said I sued him, I never sued him. And at the end of the day, he is completely wrong in what he says about what my comments on deportation. So let's just get that absolutely clear.
Right.
And
I think
look, the state's going to come for me. They don't like what I'm saying, but I am intent on giving the British people an option to vote for something new.
It couldn't be clearer. And after you've listened to that, it's clear that Reform UK, after the launch of Restore Britain, have felt a bit of pressure and thereby strengthened their policy offering. For example, now Zia Yusuf is pledging to also ban the burqa and all face coverings so that it doesn't sound targeted towards Muslims. And I can attest to the fact that Reform UK is feeling the pressure because I've had people from inside Millbank Tower tip me off saying they're worried about recruiting candidates for the next general election because some of their base might prefer to stand for Restore instead, and that they're worried that Restore Britain will split the vote, gain enough traction among disillusioned reform voters who don't like what Zia Yusuf did to Rupert Lowe, or what Nigel Farage has said in the past on mass deportations, and thereby deny reform an outright majority. Which isn't just a worry because we might get a Green, Liberal, Labour coalition, but also there's a lot of money riding on Reform UK. From the previous Brexit Party and UKIP people hoping for peerages and payouts from a lucrative patronage system, as well as safe seats at the next general election, to a lot of foreign and domestic investment, who have banked on reform becoming the next government and are already lining up contracts for crypto, AI, and data centres. A lot of money and a lot of hope is riding on reform, and if Restore deny them an outright majority because Rupert Lowe has consistently promised the policies that Reform UK are now adopting, despite having kicked him out of the party for promising previously, then people are going to realise I may as well vote for Restore, because the guy who's been consistently promising them is more likely to deliver than the people who feel pressured into adopting his policies because they're worried that I won't vote for them anymore. And the fact that this pressure is felt is clearest in Zia Yusuf and the broader party's rhetoric on Britain's Christian heritage. Now, first of all, why would you choose a party, Reform UK, that has a Muslim Shadow Home Secretary, a Muslim Mayor of London candidate, and in Nadim Zahawi, a Boris Wave cabinet minister, Muslim immigrant, who's probably going to be their shadow foreign secretary? Why would you choose them to represent and defend your Christian heritage and your Christian faith, rather than Restore Britain, who are promising the same thing and a bit stronger, and are actually Christians? But Zia Yusuf is using language straight from Restore Britain in his media appearances and his interviews in the likes of The Times. It says here, Zia Yusuf, the party's new Home Affairs spokesman, said renewing Britain's Christian faith was vital to tackle the crisis of meaning culturally among young people and men in particular. In an interview with The Times before his speech on Monday, yesterday, setting out his plans to be Home Secretary, he said Christianity was core to the history and the DNA of the country. He said Britain was losing its Christian values because of the sheer quantities of people that came into the country in a short period of time from non-Christian Muslim countries. Yusuf, a practicing Muslim, said, "What we've seen is that sense of high-trust society eroded quite rapidly, actually, and that's in no small part because of the vast numbers of people who have arrived over a short period of time from low-trust societies. Some people might wince at that phrase, but it's just obviously true." Yusuf said, "Regardless of whether somebody is of faith or not, or which faith they follow, I think the Christian heritage of this country is very important, and protecting our heritage and our culture is important. Otherwise, the country is not just a country, it's just an economic zone." This flies in the face of the meltdown that London mayoral candidate Laila Cunningham had after Charlie Downs, in an interview with Alex Phillips on Talk, said that being British is about having British ancestry, having at least one parent who is English, Scottish, Welsh or Irish, and that the Christian faith is inextricable from British identity. It's woven into our common law, it shaped our nuclearised family units, it produced our high-trust, entrepreneurial society. And because of that, Laila Cunningham decided to call Charlie Downs on Restore Britain a neo-Nazi party on GB News, and has still to yet issue a retraction for that, by the way. And she went on Talk and said that Rupert Lowe believes British people are only white and Christian.
British people are not going to vote for a party that only believes you can be British if you're white and Christian.
Hang on a second. Rupert Lowe didn't say that. A 17-year-old kid said that.
No, Charlie Downs, who's been on your show, has said that.
He didn't say
that.
Christian values. He said the word values.
So if you don't, so if you don't follow Christian values, you are not British. Is that what you're saying, Peter?
I'm not. Don't speak
Is that
for
what they're
Restore,
saying?
but that, for me, that's how I took it and interpreted it. Which
That's
I think
not what
is
I said.
basically the basis of most of our laws and Christian traditions.
No,
so yes, he is kind of right.
We can't live in a secular government.
How well's that going?
Look, you're saying we're not secular? We should not be secular?
Well, I don't think we are. I think this is the point that Restore kind of bringing to the front, is that yet we have religion
we're not
as
a secular state.
Yeah.
Well, we are. Really.
No,
we're not.
We are.
We're not.
We don't have
it's a fact. We're not a secular state. We have a state religion, therefore we're not a secular state.
The difference between a
That's a
secular
fact.
and a non-secular.
That's a fact.
We don't have people of the
But
church.
we are not a secular state.
We are.
Iraq is, we're not.
People of religious faith, of either way, in this country, do not hold positions of government. That's what a secular state is.
No, we are a secular. We're not a secular state because we've got a state religion.
The monarch is head of
the Church of England.
Yeah, but they do not have any governmental power.
It's his government. He has governmental power. He's a constitutional monarch. He's not just there for,
Hello, everybody. Hello.
It has to be said that Laila Cunningham is deeply unpleasant. When she loses an argument or says something stupid, she doesn't admit fault. She just raises her voice and shifts the goalposts and keeps digging when she's already in a hole. It's absurd for her to have said what she said. She's basically Dubai-brained, because no, Britain is not a secular country. The government is His Majesty's government, and he's the head of the Church of England. And we have bishops in the House of Lords. We have an established church. Ever since King Alfred's Doom Book, common law has been based on Christianity. King Alfred had a copy of the Ten Commandments in the front of his Doom Book and enumerated Britain's laws to be the same number as the years of the life of Moses. I mean, it's inarguable that Britain is a Christian country. But after this disastrous appearance, Laila Cunningham took to Twitter to double down again and said the opposite of secular is theocratic, which is untrue, and Britain is not that. We have an established faith, but we are not governed by religion, constitutionally Christian, governed through secular law. But our law isn't secular. We are constitutionally Christian, so that means that we aren't a secular state. And you're just using weasel words to try to say, well, what I actually meant was, when it's not what you meant, you were just wrong. Reminder, this woman's a lawyer. Totally inadequate. And the party is at war with itself here because Zia Yusuf uses completely different language. Language that sounds like it's been ripped straight from Restore Britain's launch video. Here's what he said at yesterday's press conference.
In terms of the point about preserving Christian heritage, look, it is beyond the scope of a Home Secretary or a Prime Minister or any elected official to tell British people what religion they should follow or whether they should follow a religion. This is about Britain's Christian heritage. Look, I'm not Christian, but I went to a Christian school. I can see that so much of what makes Britain such a great country is associated and irrevocably derived from Britain's Christian heritage. And by the way, I think that's a very popular view. I hear that all the time from people. And so the idea that churches should be converted into mosque or any other place of worship, I think that's incendiary. And I think it cuts to the heart of what it means to protect our cultures.
Well, it's certainly not popular with your own party, Zia. It's not popular with Laila Cunningham, your London mayoral candidate. And it's also not popular with Nigel Farage, who then came on stage and hurriedly reintroduced the hyphen Judeo-Christian rather than Christian, correcting Zia Yusuf, saying that Britain has a Christian heritage rather than a Judeo-Christian heritage. I mean, Judaism and Christianity are separate religions, so to hyphenate them doesn't make any sense. But the fact that Zia Yusuf has been so strong on his rhetoric about the need for Christianity to protect Christian heritage, when he's not a Christian and the other Christians in the party demand that British government and the country must be secular, means that reform is insufficiently and inconsistently committed to their own stated positions. So why would you vote for a party to protect Christianity when the people doing it aren't Christian, and the people in the party who also aren't Christian insist that we shouldn't be a Christian country, when there is a party, Restore Britain, promising to protect Christianity while also being Christians? And why would you vote for a party to carry out mass deportations that have denounced mass deportations, tried to put one of their own MPs in prison for calling for mass deportations, rather than the same MP who they tried to put in prison for announcing mass deportations, and his party that have always promised that millions must leave via mass deportations? It's clear that Reform are feeling pressure because Restore Britain has occupied the space to their right in the Overton window that Reform has vacated with their repeated denunciations of their own supporters, their own MPs, and of policies like mass deportations, to the extent to where Zia Yusuf is now just copying rhetoric from Restore Britain's launch video in his media appearances.
My promise is this: we will secure our borders, stop the invasion, we'll deport every illegal migrant in the country. We will get our police focused on one thing and one thing only, which is detecting crime, investigating crime, and arresting criminals. No more painting police cars in pride flags or dancing in the streets. And by the way, that is what our brave police officers, the men and women who serve in our force, are desperately crying out for. We'll avert the Boris wave
fiscal disaster that is looming, and we will protect British culture. One of the policies we're announcing today, and look, I'm not a Christian myself, but I know how important, regardless of what faith you are, whether you have a faith at all, the Christian heritage of this country is vitally important to a country's culture. A country without a culture is simply an economic zone.
Doesn't that sound awfully familiar?
But Restore Britain is about much more. Of radical Islam.
Almost word for word what Zia Yusuf has said just 2 weeks after the launch of Restore Britain. Despite Laila Cunningham denouncing Restore Britain, Rupert Lowe, Charlie Downs, and all its supporters as neo-Nazis for insisting that heritage is the basis of British identity and that Christianity is inextricable from our culture. How do you expect a party to defend the British people if they can't define a British person? A reminder, Nigel Farage said that being English is about how you feel and what your priorities are in a BBC interview with Nick Robinson only a few weeks ago. And when asked at a press conference in Wales what a Welsh person is, he said it's someone who's lived in Wales for 5 to 10 years. And any opinion to the contrary, such as Restore Britain's position, that British identity is derivative of being an English, Welsh, Scottish or Irish person, is derided as ethno-nationalism and the real far right by Nigel Farage.
Unless we are able to provide a proper democratic antidote to this, then I fear that we will see a rise of a really worrying, dangerous form of extreme right ethno-nationalism. And I think we're beginning, over the last couple of weeks already, to see some specimens of it. Nobody over the last quarter of a century has done more to defeat the genuine, intolerant, abhorrent, extreme far right than me. We did it with the British National Party and we'll do it with whoever else follows.
It's not far right or ethno-nationalism to notice that the British people are a people, the English, Welsh, Scottish and Irish, just as Jews are in Israel or the Japanese are in Japan, Nigel. So if we want mass deportations, we should probably ask ourselves, do we want the people conducting them to be using the language of the enemy to denounce people to their right who have been promising mass deportations far longer than they have, who misrepresent their rivals' views, who are willing to call their own base far-right, racist, ethno-nationalists, because they're worried about being called mean names by the press, who will immediately start calling them mean names if they actually do mass deportations? Or do we want the guy and the party to carry out mass deportations who respond to such smears with, "I don't care"?
I don't care.